It begins not with a headline, but with an envelope, a cream-colored card. Embossed with the seal of a national broadcast studio, lands on Karoline Leavitt's desk. The subject line is short, almost sterile. Invitation to National Town Panel. Airs live, Thursday, 8 p.m. EST. But the signature at the bottom tells her everything she needs to know. Judith Schindlin. It's Judy. Karoline stares at it in silence. No one in her office speaks. She's been invited to sit on a primetime, cloud, live panel moderated by one of television's most polarizing figures. Judge Judy, known for her decades of courtroom flair, cutting through nonsense and never sparing. The Rod now hosts a rebranded political roundtable where guests are grilled, not guided. It's a lion's den, a gauntlet, and the cameras never blink. At first, Karoline considers declining. She doesn't need the circus. Not now, not when her momentum is finally stabilizing. She's young, yes, but she's already sparring with anchors twice her age on morning shows and steering policy debates in closed-door meetings. Her team warns her, Judy doesn't ask questions. She makes statements dressed as questions. But deep down, Karoline knows something they don't. She's not walking into a courtroom. She's walking into history on. She has no intention of blinking first. For the next 4 days, she prepares in silence. No grand rehearsals, no shouting matches and mock panels. Just her, a legal pad, and clips from Judy's past shows. She doesn't study the woman, she studies the rhythm, the tempo, the pattern of interruptions, the cues when Judy cuts someone off. The moment the crowd turns from intrigued to entertained. And that's where Karoline decides she will not be entertainment. The topic is leaked 2 days before airtime. It's not just policy, it's personal. The panel will tackle border control, generational authority, and the definition of personal responsibility in modern America. A trifecta, a minefield, a setup. She doesn't flinch. She circles the words. On her prep notes, generational bias, weaponized respectability, controlled dignity. By the time Thursday evening arrives, the nation is already buzzing. The guest list is leaked. 1 former cabinet advisor, 1 immigration lawyer, 1 Gen Z activist, and Karoline. The outlier, the youngest. The one with the most to lose and, perhaps, the most to prove. Backstage, the air is thick. Makeup artists work in silence. Staff whisper into earpieces. The stage manager counts down time in a hushed tone, as if the lights above might shatter from the pressure. Karoline sits alone in a corner, her hands folded, her eyes steady. A producer approaches her with a half-smile. Nervous? She looks up slowly, calm and unsmiling. No, she says, prepared. In Studio B, the audience is already seated. Every chair filled, phones silenced, anticipation palpable. Judge Judy walks out first, greeted with thunderous applause. She doesn't wave. She doesn't smile. She sits queen-like behind a modern glass desk to a Bale mic with precision. Tonight, she announces, we separate theory from reality. Karoline walks out next. The applause is muted, not disrespectful, just cautious. Viewers at home may see a smile on their screens, but in person, her entrance carries weight. She's not smiling for approval. She's standing for something. Everyone in the room feels it as the lights dim and the cameras roll. Karoline hears the first question land hard, fast, and loaded. But she doesn't speak yet. She watches, she reads the room, and she remembers. She wasn't invited here to be understood. She was invited to be underestimated. And that, she thinks, is exactly where her advantage begins. Before we continue this story, tell us where are you watching from Bummy Plemmy. If you believe real truth matters more than theatrics, hit that subscribe button right now. The next chapter is where the tension begins. The studio lights are deceptively warm, soft golden hues bouncing gently off the glass, desk, and polished floor. But beneath their glow, the atmosphere is anything but comfortable. The panel is now live. 4 chairs, 4 voices. But one imbalance that everyone notices, even if no one speaks of it aloud. Karoline Leavitt sits at the far right of the panel. Her chair is slightly angled, a minor detail, but it creates a visual separation from the others. Deliberate? Maybe. Symbolic? Absolutely. She is, by all measures, the outlier. The youngest panelist. The only millennial conservative voice. And the only participant not holding a law degree or decades of establishment clout. To her left sits Harold Kina, retired Homeland Security advisor with a booming voice and a politician's cadence. Beside him, Marisol Reyes, a seasoned immigration lawyer with sharp glasses and sharper rhetoric. And next to her, David Chen, a Gen Z activist from Brooklyn with bright sneakers and a master's degree in human rights law. And then, there's Judge Judy, centered, elevated, and silent for now. She opens with a nod to the gravity of the conversation. This isn't just about policy, she says, her voice clear and commanding. This is about identity, about what kind of country we want to become, who gets to shape that vision. Her eyes scan the room, but when they land on Karoline, they linger. For the first few minutes, the discussion is structured, almost clinical. Judy directs the first question to Marisol about asylum policy loopholes. Marisol answers crisply, with data and references. Harold follows, framing his take from a national security perspective. David throws in an emotional anecdote about a classmate's undocumented status and ties it to systemic privilege. Then Judy turns to Karoline. "Ms. Leavitt," she says, the honorific tight on her tongue. "You've spoken in favor of more stringent border controls and criticized this administration's handling of immigration. But help me understand, at what point in your 26 years did you become an expert in international law?" The audience reacts, not laughter, but a few sharp exhales. A veiled jab cloaked as curiosity. Karoline doesn't flinch. She blinks once, then speaks not to Judy, but to the American people watching through the lens. "I'm not here as a legal scholar," she says evenly. "I'm here as a citizen who's seen firsthand what broken systems do to real communities. You don't need a gavel to recognize consequences. You just need to pay attention." Judge Judy smiles, but not kindly. "I'm paying attention, Ms. Leavitt. That's why I'm asking for specifics, not sentiments." Karoline holds her gaze, then nods once, almost imperceptibly. "Then let's talk specifics." And she does. With sharp focus, she outlines a case involving a town in New Hampshire flooded with undocumented arrivals due to a policy loophole, a town where resources were stretched. Schools overwhelmed, and local hospitals forced to turn away longtime residents for lack of capacity. Her voice remains level, but the room tightens around her. Judy interrupts halfway through. "But were those resources denied because of the new arrivals or because of long-standing budget failures by your own state leadership? Let's not shift blame for mismanagement to migrants." Again, the interruption isn't aggressive, just surgical. Controlled. Karoline pauses. Her breath steadies. She meets Judy's interruption not with anger, but with a subtle countermeasure. "I think the public is capable of holding more than one truth at once," she replies. "Yes, budgets failed. And yes, that failure was magnified by policy decisions made without input from the people they affect." A low murmur ripples through the audience. Even David, sitting next to her, glances sideways. Not in hostility, just curiosity. What's happening isn't a debate. It's a slow dissection. Judy is slicing at Karoline's legitimacy not with insults, but with rhetorical scalpels. Small jabs, loaded phrasing. Timing her interruptions, like a maestro conducting doubt. I wonder, Judy muses minutes later, after Karoline finishes a thought on generational accountability. If perhaps your generation confuses conviction with credentials. The blow lands, not loud, but deep. Karoline breathes in. 1 Mississippi, 2 Mississippi. Then, in the clearest tone of the night, conviction built this country. Credentials just walked in after the fact and named the streets. Silence. Even Harold tilts his head. Judy leans back ever so slightly. A flicker of something: respect, irritation. It's unclear. But Karoline isn't finished. I don't mind scrutiny, she continues. What I mind is when scrutiny becomes censorship. When asking questions labels you a threat, and being young means your patriotism has to wait in line. For a second, the panel feels still. Not because Karoline yelled, she didn't. Not because she was aggressive, she wasn't. But because her restraint, her calm, was starting to sound less like defensiveness and more like power. Judy shifts tactics. You've talked a lot about what's broken, she says. What then would you fix first, if given the power? And that's when the strategy becomes clear. Judy isn't interested in a policy plan. She's looking for a moment to slip, a soundbite, an overreach. But Karoline doesn't give it. She lifts her eyes, voice unwavering. I'd fix the idea. That power belongs only to the seasoned. Because if you silence the next generation long enough, don't be surprised when they stop asking permission to speak. The air in the studio turns electric. No applause, just absorption. Viewers at home are already tweeting quotes. Editors are clipping segments. Something is happening, not loudly, but undeniably. Karoline leans back slightly. Her hands remain still in her lap, fingers laced. Her voice, her composure, has not once cracked. But Judy leans forward now. Her smile is thinner, sharper, and in that moment between the words, beneath the civility, behind the blinking cameras, you can see it. The power is beginning to shift. It happens 32 minutes into the broadcast. Until now, everything has been tension-wrapped in civility. Tactical questions, measured answers. The illusion of respect barely holding together the show's decorum. But when the topic shifts, from immigration to judicial overreach, the tension finally unspools. Karoline is mid-sentence scum, articulate, dissecting the double standards of legal power in America when the pressure bursts. I find it fascinating. She says, her tone unshaken, that we're told courts are neutral. But when rulings disproportionately impact working-class communities, especially young voices challenging status quos, we're told to sit down and trust the system. She doesn't raise her voice. She doesn't need to. It's what comes after that pushes the fault line. And when judges, not just lawmakers, but judges, use their robes like armor to dismiss questions of generational relevance, that's not law. That's legacy protection. The moment those words leave her mouth, it's like a pin drops in a balloon factory. Harold exhales sharply and looks away. Marisol straightens in her chair. Even David, the Gen Z activist who has been mostly nodding along, now appears visibly unsure. But Karoline, she doesn't blink. And that's when Judy slams her palm on the table. The crack of it echoes through the studio, crack like a starter pistol. Not scripted, not moderated. Just raw, the audience jolts. Some gasp. One woman in the front row visibly grips her coat. Then Judy speaks, not with her usual legalese or quick jabs. She screams, "ENOUGH. You come on my stage, sit in my courtroom of discourse, and dare to lecture me on the role of the judiciary." She leans forward now, her voice sharp, not just raised, but pierced with fury. You think being young and clever gives you license to disrespect the bench. You are weaponizing your youth and your ignorance like a shield, and I won't have it. The panel freezes. Harold turns his body slightly away, arms folded. Marisol glances at the producers, as if silently asking, should we intervene? David's mouth opens, then closes. He lowers his eyes, and then the camera cuts to Karoline. She's still. Her face hasn't shifted into panic or defense. She doesn't throw her hands up, doesn't shake her head. Her eyes just hold Judy's, completely still. She's breathing. Yes, but slowly. Deliberately, and then comes the flicker. Not fear, not even surprise. Something else, a momentary flicker of understanding. She sees something in Judy's anger that others don't. Something insecure. Something exposed. But she doesn't exploit it. She just waits. The silence is deafening. Viewers at home are frozen in place. Production staff hover just out of frame, unsure whether to cut to commercial or let it ride. No one dares interrupt this moment because something irreversible has happened. The mask of control has shattered. Judy realizes it too, but it's too late. Her outburst is live. Her scream is replaying in real time across newsrooms and social feeds. And Karoline? She moves only once. A slow, almost imperceptible tilt of her head chin raised half an inch. Like someone adjusting their posture before delivering a verdict of their own. But she doesn't rush to speak. She lets the silence sit there. Like a stone in the throat of the studio. It lasts a full 10 seconds. Then, in a voice so calm it feels surgical, she says, I was invited here to speak, not to be disciplined like a student. Not to be scolded like a child. And certainly not to be screamed at by someone who built their reputation telling others to control themselves. The studio goes completely still. No reaction from Judy, no reaction from the others, just the sound of breath. The hum of overhead lights, the whir of the camera rail shifting ever so slightly for a tighter frame. Karoline leans back slightly in her chair, not in retreat, but in reclamation. The emotional high ground belongs to her now. Not because she took it, but because Judy gave it away, and everyone saw it happen. Judy opens her mouth again, but no words come out. Her shoulders rise, fall, and then nothing. She reaches for her water glass and takes a long sip. It's not just hydration, it's delay. She needs a moment to recover only. There's no room for retreat in live television. Karoline continues, unshaken. I came here because I was told we'd have a conversation about truth, leadership, and generational change. If the definition of respect is silence in the face of tone policing and generational gatekeeping, then I respectfully decline. She folds her hands in her lap again. No flourish. No anger, just poise. The audience doesn't clap. They don't need to. The gravity of the moment is too heavy for applause. Instead, they stare. The studio cameras begin panning slowly across the panel. Harold is blinking hard, processing. Marisol now looks visibly shaken. David's foot bounces under the table, anxious, uncertain, and Judge Judy remains quiet. That's the real headline, not the scream, but the silence that followed it. What Karoline just did wasn't theatrical. It wasn't clever. It was something rarer. She didn't match power with volume. She matched it with discipline, and in that moment, she exposed something far deeper than rage. She exposed fragility. The producers finally cue a quick cutaway. A pre-recorded segment rolls. Cameras pull back, but it's too late. The damage or the shift has already been done. Inside the studio, no one speaks. Outside, the world is beginning to scream in her place. If that moment gave you chills, if you felt the tension crack like glass comment, the words shook below. And if you've ever witnessed someone win without raising their voice, let us know. The next chapter reveals just how far the ripple spreads. Silence isn't always absence. Sometimes it's dominance. The studio, just moments ago saturated with tension and rage, now folds inward into stillness. Karoline Leavitt sits frozen deliberately, not nervously. Her hands are clasped loosely in her lap, her shoulders unshaken, her eyes fixed not on Judy's face, but just beyond it, into the lens. Into the country, the second stretch. 5, 10, 15. No one says a word. The audience dares not breathe. Too loudly. Even the usual rustle of crew in the wings has ceased. A studio full of people, but it feels as though the room has shrunk to two figures. Karoline, still and steady, and Judge Judy momentarily rattled, trying to mask it with practiced stillness. 20 seconds. Then 20-5. Karoline finally blinks. One small breath passes through her nose-controlled, not theatrical. She leans forward just half an inch, not aggressively, not as a challenge, but as if to reclaim the space that had tried to collapse around her. And then, softly, so softly, it requires no force, she speaks. I was invited here to speak, not to be disciplined like a child. The line doesn't thunder, doesn't need to. It cuts. The words fall flat and clean like a scalpel through silk, and with them, the balance of power in the studio shifts without warning. Judge Judy opens her mouth, but no sentence comes out. For the first time in her broadcast history. Perhaps she's not certain whether speaking would repair or deepen the damage. Karoline doesn't follow it with an argument. She doesn't list her credentials. She doesn't demand an apology. She just waits again. That second silence hits even harder than the first. It isn't just her words that echo. It's the discipline not to follow them with more. Across the panel table, Harold adjusts his tie, eyes down. Marisol rubs her knuckle against her lip, trying to look unaffected, but failing. David sits still, blinking at the desk like he's waiting for someone to call cut. But this isn't a performance. It's a reckoning. Even viewers at home and couches across America are unsure whether they've just witnessed a political turning point or something deeper, a generational reckoning not waged through yelling matches, but through controlled defiance. Judy tries to recover. Her voice returns collected, clipped a touch too even. Well, she says, gesturing vaguely to the audience as if including them in her recalibration. When we're having serious national conversations, emotions tend to rise. Karoline doesn't nod. She doesn't disagree either. She just looks at her for a half-second longer than is polite, and then shifts her gaze back to the audience. It's a masterstroke, because, in that moment, Karoline doesn't respond to Judy. She doesn't need to. She's already done something far more lethal. She's made Judy's outburst the centerpiece of the episode, not her policies, not her legacy, not even her authority, just her lack of control. And the contrast is impossible to miss. Where Judy had rage, Karoline had restraint. Where Judy reached for volume, Karoline wielded silence. And that silence is now trending. Clips are being clipped. Screenshots are spreading. The sentence, "I was invited here to speak," is already captioned over videos, tweeted by journalists, stitched into reels by activists. No screaming match. No podium pounding. Just discipline under pressure. Back. In the studio, the moderator's script has gone cold. The producers in the control room exchange glances, unsure whether to redirect or ride the wave, but no redirection is coming. Karoline, just the microphone clipped to her blazer. Slowly, quietly, like someone with nothing to hide and everything still to say. And Judge Judy. She finally reaches for her cue cards, not to read from them, but to hold them. A new kind of grip. One that signals she knows the shift has happened and there's no reversing it now. Karoline Leavitt came in underestimated. She will leave. Remembered, and all she needed was 30 seconds of silence. The applause doesn't follow her off stage. There is no ovation, no congratulations whispered in the wings, only the soft shuffle of production staff moving around her. A crew member hands her a bottle of water. Another points her toward the green room, but no one meets her eyes. No one dares to not yet. Karoline walks slowly, carefully, as if each step out of the studio is a release of pressure built up over the last hour. Her body doesn't tremble, but inside, adrenaline still surges quiet, steady, measured like her voice. Not rage, not relief, something heavier, something deeper. A sense that she didn't just survive something on that stage, she altered it. The backstage hallway is narrow and fluorescent lit. The door to the dressing room creaks when she opens it. Inside, it's quiet. A black leather couch, a mirror, still glowing softly with studio bulbs, and a half-empty coffee cup from hours ago. Karoline sits down, alone. No words yet from her team. They're out there speaking to producers, maybe fielding reporters, but here, in this moment, there is only silence. She doesn't mind. She leans forward, elbows resting on her knees, hands clasped mirroring the posture she held on stage when the world was watching. But now, without the cameras, without the glare, she exhales. Not in exhaustion. In recognition, her phone buzzes in her lap. Then again, and again, and again. She doesn't pick it up right away. Let the world wait for her, just for a few minutes. Let them react, repost, rage, rally, whatever they're going to do. She had done what she came to do. And now she waits for the rest to catch up. Eventually, she unlocks her screen. 428 new messages, 31 missed calls, a dozen voicemails, hundreds of tags, mentions, links, all buzzing, pinging, flowing like a tide too strong to contain. She scrolls past the noise, skip the headlines, skip the viral edits, skip the chaos, until she sees one name she recognizes. A former congressman, a mentor, not flashy, not famous, but someone whose silence always carried weight. The message is brief. That wasn't a moment. That was a movement. Her thumb hovers over the reply button, but she doesn't respond. Not yet. Not because she's unsure, but because she knows that what she just did can't be summarized in a thank you. It demands time to sink in. Karoline puts the phone down, stares at her reflection in the dressing room mirror. She doesn't look victorious. She doesn't even look satisfied. She looks still, and then she says it aloud, barely above a whisper, as if affirming it to herself. I didn't come to win. I came to withstand. It wasn't a performance. It wasn't even resistance. It was refusal. Refusal to be pulled into the circus. Refusal to meet fire with fire. Refusal to let tone drown truth. She thinks back to Judy's voice raised, trembling, with fury. She remembers the audience frozen in disbelief. The silence that followed. The moment she said, I was invited here to speak, and how everything after that shifted. It wasn't about winning a debate. It wasn't about delivering a zinger. It was about proving live. Without theatrics, that dignity is more disruptive than drama. The door creaks again. One of her aides steps inside, cautious, unsure of what to say. You okay? Karoline nods. Yes. The aide glances at her phone. You're trending in 12 countries. Karoline gives the faintest smile. For speaking softly. The aide laughs, then stops, realizing the weight of the moment. They're already calling it the Judy showdown, but it doesn't feel like that anymore. It feels bigger. Karoline stands, straightens her blazer, looks into the mirror. One last time, not adjusting, not fixing, just acknowledging. I didn't come for a showdown, she says quietly. Came to be heard. The aide nods, says nothing more, and as Karoline walks out of the dressing room, head high, pace calm, she isn't walking away from the moment. She's walking into whatever comes next, because in that silence, She didn't just endure, she transformed. It begins within the hour. Clips of the moment hit social media before Karoline has even left the building. One is a tight frame, her face calm, unblinking, while Judge Judy shouts mid-sentence. Another is slowed to half speed, capturing the split-second Karoline leans forward and says, "I was invited here to speak." Someone adds subtitles in Spanish. Another uploads a reaction video titled, "When Power Meets Poise." The hashtags multiply. Hashtag Leavitt Vs, Judy hashtag silence, as strength hashtag young voices matter. By midnight, a dozen TikToks use the audio for lip-sync reenactments. On Instagram, a side-by-side comparison of the outburst and Karoline's response is framed like a courtroom exhibit. On Twitter now, called X, the commentary becomes fierce, polarizing, and impossible to ignore. But this time, something is different. Usually, viral moments favor outrage. Flashy quotes, raised voices. This time, what spreads is restraint. What echoes is stillness. People aren't quoting Karoline because she yelled, they're quoting her because she did single quotes by morning. Major news outlets are in full dissection mode. CNN invites a panel of legal scholars to weigh in. MSNBC runs a segment titled "When Generational Tensions Go Live." Even Fox News, usually quick to pounce, frames the incident not as controversy, but as contrast. KarolineLeavitt.com, in the courtroom of public opinion. Print follows suit. The Washington Post publishes an op titled, "When Women Refuse to Play the Game." The Atlantic analyzes the moment through the lens of generational gatekeeping in political media. Politico calls it a seismic generational clash wrapped in professional etiquette. But it isn't just journalists who weigh in. Psychologists begin analyzing the clip on YouTube channels and podcasts. One prominent body language expert breaks down Karoline's posture, voice control, and the way she lets silence carry the burden of credibility. She calls it a masterclass in unthreatened authority. Sociologists highlight the dynamics at play: gender, institutional power, and how quickly Judy's courtroom instincts, honed over decades, were diffused not by another gavel, but by someone refusing to mirror her anger. University professors catch on. Within a week, the moment is assigned in 24 communication courses across the country. One professor at Georgetown has her students reenact it for a class on public persuasion and perception. Another at Columbia assigns a paper on tone bias in political discourse. Using Karoline's segment as the case study, and in all of it, Karoline says nothing more. She doesn't post a follow-up. She doesn't do a celebratory media tour. She doesn't retweet, praise, or share trending hashtags. She lets the moment stand untouched, undiluted by reaction. That silence. It only deepens the impact. Meanwhile, in Judy's camp, the silence is more complicated. There's no public apology, no retraction, no clarifying statement. But quietly, discreetly, 3 of her upcoming public appearances are postponed for scheduling reasons. Producers at the network don't confirm anything, but whispers leak. She's rattled. Not ruined, but rattled. After all, Judge Judy built an empire on control. This time, control slipped. And the internet doesn't forget. Then, a new ripple. The Sunday political circuit calls. Karoline receives 3 invitations. One from Meet the Nation, one from This Morning in America, and one from the Briefing Roundtable. But this time, she's tissed. Not just a guest, she's the anchor guest. The opening chair, the headline segment. They don't invite her to be grilled. They invite her to set the tone. On that Sunday morning, she walks onto the set of Meet the Nation. The lights are bright, but gentler than before. The host shakes her hand, not warily, but with genuine curiosity. "I have to ask," he says, during the opening, "did you expect that moment with Judge Judy to become this?" Karoline tilts her head slightly, thoughtful. I didn't expect it. I didn't try to create it. I just didn't move when someone wanted me to flinch. The host nods. The audience watching from home nods with him. That same day, a high school senior in Illinois posts a video on TikTok saying she wants to go into politics because of Karoline Leavitt's grace. The post goes viral. In Mississippi, a former state representative writes a Facebook post about how Karoline reminded him of his daughter quiet, focused, often ignored in rooms full of noise. He ends the post with, "She didn't scream. She didn't shrink. She just stood." Even critics, those who disagree with her politics, admit the moment was bigger than policy. One progressive commentator writes, "I don't agree with Karoline's views, but I respect how she held the line. She made Judy lose her balance not by pushing back, but by standing still." And that's when it becomes clear. It was never just a moment. It was a mirror held up to every institution that rewards volume over thought. A mirror reflecting what happens when a younger voice refuses to ask permission to speak. The ripple continues. The phrase, "I was invited here to speak," is printed on tote bags, posters, pins. By the end of the month, Karoline is profiled in Time magazine's Next 100 list. Not because she yelled, not because she triumphed, but because she endured and made us rethink what endurance looks like. And Judge Judy, she fades for a time. Not canceled, not condemned, just quiet. Because now, whenever she raises her voice on air, there's always a comment under the clip that reads, "Still not as powerful as the girl who didn't raise hers." It's a small town hall in Vermont, not a national stage, not a polished network set. It's just folding chairs, paper programs, and the smell of burnt coffee from the table near the entrance. Karoline walks in quietly. There's no press pool, no entourage. Just her and one staffer, slipping into a room that feels more like a community gathering than a campaign stop. She's scheduled to speak about infrastructure and broadband access. But when she's introduced, the applause is softer than usual, reverent, almost. A woman in the front row stands up before Karoline can begin. She's older, maybe early 60s, wears a denim jacket and holds a piece of paper folded in her hand. Her voice shakes as she speaks, not from nerves, but from something deeper. "I just want to say, I've been watching politics for 40 years. I've never seen someone like me win with silence." The room falls still. Karoline looks up. Her eyes meet the woman's not with surprise, not with pride, but with understanding. The kind of understanding that doesn't need words. She doesn't speak, she just nods. Softly, intentionally, because some power doesn't need to be explained. It doesn't need a microphone or a trending clip. It just needs to be held. The woman sits back down, dabbing her eyes. Others in the audience shift in their seats, visibly moved. Not by a speech, but by the absence of one. By the weight of what wasn't said in the weeks since the broadcast. Karoline has spoken at universities, town halls, and boardrooms. But people don't ask her about policy first. They ask her about that moment. They ask her how she didn't scream, how she didn't flinch, how she didn't respond with fire, but with stillness that burned hotter. And each time, she gives the same answer: a small smile, a pause, and a shift back to what matters next. Because for Karoline, it was never about being viral. It was about being visible. Visible for every young woman who's ever been talked over. For every professional who's been told to wait their turn. For every voice told to lower its volume before it's even begun to speak. That night wasn't a performance. It wasn't a showdown. 'Twas a recalibration. And once the world saw that silence could carry truth more powerfully than noise, it couldn't be unseen. Was this the most powerful confrontation you've ever seen on live television? Drop your thoughts in the comments, and if you want more stories where truth silences noise, Subscribe now.